Welcome to Everything Dog Training with me, John McGuigan. Our goal is to bring you information on dog training methods which work and are kind, cutting through the myth and the folklore to help you have a better behaved, happier, emotionally healthier dog who is a joy to be around. Our guest on the show today is Aileen Stevenson, a dog trainer and behaviour consultant and who is the founder of the Perfect Puppy Company in Glasgow. Aileen specialises in family dog training and in particular providing training and advice to prepare families with dogs for life with children. Aileen is a certified training partner of the Karen Pryor Academy, a full member of the Institute of Modern Dog Trainers and Scotland's first and currently only Family Paws licensed trainer. Aileen lives in Glasgow.
Alright, so hi Aileen, thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to spend some time with us talking about Family Paws.
Thanks very much, you're welcome.
Alright, so this is take two. We started recording this and I forgot to press the record button, but thankfully we're only a minute into it. Okay, so Family Paws is an organisation, kind of training school, and I believe you're the only one in Scotland, is that right?
Yep, that's right.
And you probably need to go further down in England to get the next one that's north.
Yeah, I think there's somebody in the north of England and then a few further down south. There's not many of us in the UK at all.
Okay, so what is it? What is Family Paws?
So Family Paws is an organisation that provides training to professional dog trainers specifically to help them work with and support new and expectant families. So really it's to help give dog trainers the skills they need to kind of enable and build success between babies and toddlers and family dogs. That's what Family Paws does. It was set up by a trainer in America called Jen Shyok, who worked with, I think it was a German Shepherd rescue, a rescue of some description anyway, and she came across more and more families who were considering, with young children or new babies, who were struggling with their dogs and were considering rehoming their dogs and surrendering their dogs to the rescue that she worked with. So she saw that there was a kind of lack of knowledge or a disconnect there. So she set up Family Paws to try and provide trainers with the skills to be able to help new families keep their dogs in the home.
Yeah, perfect.
Because a new baby is one of the top 3 reasons that dogs are surrendered for rehoming.
Yeah.
So if families have got the skills, it enables more dogs to stay in their home, basically, safely in their home.
Perfect, right. I'm just going to tuck Logan in, hang on. I did. So it's every time, it's like a cue for him to want tucked in is when I go into a Zoom call. Okay, all right. So it's there to assist families and then to try and keep dogs in their houses, which is what their own homes, which is what we're looking for. We're all looking for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's often a new baby's a time of huge change for humans, obviously. But it's also a time of huge change for the dogs. And unfortunately, I think lots of people often we do a lot of work preparing ourselves. You know, we read books and we join antenatal classes and we join Mumsnet and all these things, but we don't often give an awful lot of thought to the changes that are going to happen for the dog. And then the dog struggles with those changes. And then you've got a bit of a perfect storm of a dog that's struggling, new parents, you know, lack of sleep, no time, and people give up, you know. Understandably, that's not a criticism, but, you know, people then are struggling with their dogs and can't cope with it. So the kind of aim of Family Paws is ideally before there's a problem, before the baby arrives, is to begin to work with families, help them consider what might change for the dog, how well the dog might cope with that, and what we need to do to make the process just easier for the dog. Because if it's easier for the dog, it's going to be easier for the humans.
Yeah. And you know yourself, I mean, so how old are your kids?
So I've got 2 girls who are 15 and 14 next week.
Okay, and mine are 18 and 20, but I do remember that it's a life-changing event when you have your first child, and then it's another life-changing event when you have your second one, or third, or fourth.
Yeah, I mean, it's the after, you know, when you've just had a baby, especially your first baby, you know, your world's turned upside down. You're, and especially in the first few weeks, you're getting to grips with it. You're learning how to be a parent, which is, a big job in itself, and especially for for the mum, you're hormonal, you're very emotional. You've got this huge weight of responsibility that I think most new parents feel really keenly. You're so desperate to do everything right. You're quite vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable and physically vulnerable often as well, depending on how things have gone for you. So that's hard enough in and of itself, but adding problems with your dog into that, it can just be what tips people over the edge, and it's, as I say, it's a stressful enough time without dealing with behaviour from your dog. Yeah. So a bit of forethought and a bit of help from somebody can really,
Yeah, and if we think of it, it's a huge change in our life. So the dog it's going to be a massive. It can be a complete upheaval for the dog as well. Yeah. So the dog our dogs then have to adapt to that. But they don't really know what's going on. They've had no real advanced warning of it. It's just that, there's changes in, they'll be able to detect changes in mum because of your changes in century hormones and stuff like this. But this new wee thing arrives. Aye. And the dog gets blanked.
Yeah. They know there's changes, and that's what often one of the questions that people ask is, does my dog know I'm pregnant? And the dog knows something's going on because you smell different, and as you get further in pregnancy, your gait changes and your movement changes, and you're maybe breathless, or so the dog knows something's changing, but it doesn't know what that something is. It's got no concept that there's going to be a new person in the household. So. And then when that new baby arrives, so much changes for the dog that people, I think it's easy to kind of not think about in advance. The attention they get for lots and lots of dogs, especially if it's a first baby, they've been I hate this term, but the fur baby, they've got all the attention from, their owners, their humans. That changes overnight. The amount of time you've got to devote to your dog, the amount of exercise your dog gets, the kind of exercise your dog gets, who exercises the dog, where the dog sleeps, the dog's routine might change, who's kind of primary carer for the dog, that might change depending on, what your family setup has been. So much changes. And it changes overnight in most cases. Yeah, absolutely. And then we wonder why the dog can't cope. And it starts to throw out all these kind of aberrant behaviours, and it's frustrated, or it's stressed, or it's anxious, and in some cases, some take it in their stride, neither up nor down, but leaving it to chance is, I think a little bit of preparation, a little bit of forethought can really make a big difference.
So we'll circle back around to kind of stuff that we can do with the dog towards the end of our chat. What are the common issues that you see or that you're called in to deal with?
So I think the people that call me in fall into two camps, and within those camps there's different kind of categories. So there's the proactive people that call you in advance, and some of those people aren't anticipating any issues. They just want to kind of tick all the boxes and make sure that they've covered everything off, and that they're not concerned about their dog. They just want to make sure they're kind of doing everything right. Then you get the people that call you in advance because they are anticipating a problem. They maybe know they've got a dog that's maybe not got a great history around children already, or is just a nervous, anxious, worried dog. It doesn't take to change very easily. Yeah. So that's the kind of proactive people. And then you get the reactive people who call you after the event when they're having issues. Yeah. And those issues can be, so I would say they probably fall into three categories. You've got the dogs that are maybe anxious or worried by the baby. You've got the dogs that are super interested in the baby and really stimulated by the baby. Yeah. And then you've got the dogs that they might not be that interested in the baby one way or the other, but there are problems or things that the dog does that maybe weren't an issue before. Yeah. but you add a baby into the mix and suddenly it's a big issue. And they can be really simple. They can be things like pulling on the lead, because it might be something that is not great, but you can live with it when it's just you, two adults or an adult, you know. But trying to have a dog pulling on the lead when you're pushing a pram, or maybe wearing a baby in a sling, you know, you don't want the risk of getting pulled off your feet.
It's dangerous.
Yeah,
It's dangerous for everybody at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. So the problems are like barking, another one. You know, the dog that kicks off at the window when somebody goes by. That's something you probably, you know, didn't really bother about too much before. But if you've just put your baby down to sleep, that's becomes a problem. So I'd say those are the three main categories: the kind of fearful, anxious, worried dog, the super interested, really stimulated dog, and then the dogs that it's not the baby itself that's causing the dog an issue, it's the fact that the dog has got other behaviours that are suddenly kind of reframed because there's suddenly a baby in the picture.
So like jumping up, moving fast, barreling through doors. Well,
jumping up, so that's a really common one, because it's like you don't mind when it's you're an adult, but holding an infant, suddenly that's not so great.
Especially as a big dog.
The other one that's really common actually as well is an inability to settle on their own.
Okay.
So that's one of the first questions I'll always ask somebody, and quite often they'll come back and they'll say, oh no, they're fine when, you know, we can leave them, no problem. But what they mean is they can leave them when there's nobody in the house, but having the dog in one room and people in another room doing stuff,
is a problem.
That's really common, and that's something that a dog in a house with a young baby or a toddler, they need to be able to settle somewhere else, because there's going to be times it's just not appropriate to have them in the room unless they are, you know, they've got an amazing downstay and can just lie in their bed and not, you know. But for lots of dogs, if you're doing tummy time on the floor with the baby, or changing the baby's nappy on the floor, or sitting feeding the baby even, you know, is it appropriate to have a free roaming dog in that room? Probably not. Well, possibly not, depending on the dog.
And I remember when I didn't know Family Paws was available, and how long has it been on the go?
I think it's about the early 2000s. I think it was about 2002 it started. Jen set it up.
So because before, like, I met you and you got all my anytime I'll get an inquiry that comes in for family stuff, then it comes straight to you, because that's your bag, you know, and you're better with people with children than I am, so your attitude's a little bit better than mine. But you're trained for it, and you're more patient, so you've got that knowledge there, and then us trying to get the best available training for owners, so there would be no reason why I don't give it to you. But before we started working together, I don't know whether I'd read an article or something else, or I just looked at my own knowledge and then said, how do you put it together? And what I started doing when I was getting people while they were in pregnancy was start to train the dog to be left on their own, but it was really clear cues. So I said to them, buy like a big old clock, you know, or something like this, and you bring that clock out, and when you put the clock down, you give the dog enrichment toys, which we'll come to, or something to do, and that's a cue that your attention's not going to be available. You know, and then you remove that and then make a fuss of the dog again, and we just train this so that the dog starts going, oh, I understand, you know, this is time where mum or dad aren't available to me.
I think it's the one skill that lots of dogs don't have. Is being able to settle while there's other stuff going on in the house. You know, there's a lot of kind of, well, they're social animals. They want to be, you know, with us, and there's kind of whole FOMO thing, you know, they don't want to miss out on anything. But you know, there are times where it's just not appropriate and it's just not safe. But I think that's something that, understandably, you know, it takes time for a dog to get used to that. So trying to do that when you're in the midst of, you know, you want to be starting working on that when you find out you're pregnant. Not when you bring your baby home. That's the wrong time.
And if you are listening to this and you are expecting a baby and it's your first baby, you'll take your maternity or your paternity leave, and it'll be 2:00 in the afternoon. You've been up since 6:00 and you'll all still be in your pajamas. And not know what happened with the day, you know. So you'll not have been over the threshold of the door, but because you're just having to work out how do I get up and how do I eat, but I need to take care of the baby first, you know. So you know, and so on and so on. And if you are listening to this and you are preparing for your baby, understand. And you know, when people say that this because I was like, when we had our daughter, and people would say that to me, and I would be like, that's ridiculous. How can that possibly happen? You know, and then 7 hours of the day is gone, and you're regularly for the first several months until you actually get into your groove and say, this is now my life, you know.
Yeah.
And your dogs have to adapt to that. You know?
Oh, totally. I mean, so there's not much between my girls. There's 19 months, 20 months or something. So, I mean, there were days when if the three of us were, you know, up and dressed by kind of mid-afternoon, that was a good day, you know, that was a really good day. And I was lucky that, you know, the dog we had at that time was a really...
Rockstar.
Yeah, I mean, he was dead chilled. He was, you know, you could let him out to the garden, you know, to go to the toilet and bring him back in, and he wouldn't create and he wouldn't. So, you know, we were really lucky because that could have gone, I mean, that could have been a disaster. It could have been a nightmare with two such young children.
And the other thing with that is it's interesting because just because our dogs appear to be dealing with it, they might actually just be settling down into, oh, this is rubbish, and I'll just settle down, you know. So although that we don't see that, and they can't tell us, so we see this kind of no behaviour dog where the dog just settles and relaxes, but they actually might be scunnered. That's a Scottish word if you're listening to this, so it means fed up. Okay, right. So what can parents do to prepare for the arrival of the new puppy?
Existing
parents. No. So we'll go with existing parents first. So we've got parents with toddlers, and they're getting a new puppy.
Okay, so I think if the toddler, you know, the baby's in situ first, or the toddler is in situ first, and the puppy's coming in, I think it's like most things. There's a combination of really strong control and management.
Yep.
And
so
training.
Expand a little bit on that.
So control and management. The puppy isn't necessarily. We're not necessarily teaching the puppy anything, but what we're doing is managing the environment to, in this case, keep everyone safe. So that would be things like if you've got a young toddler in the house, you probably already have baby gates in place. But even if it's an older child, like 3, 4, 5, I would really advocate putting some baby gates back in place so that you can create some separation. So in fact, I was talking to... I took a call from a client last night about this exact thing, sort of slightly older children, 5-ish, and a new puppy. And the key to keeping kids and dogs safe and having appropriate interactions. So they've both got to learn, puppy's got to learn how to be around the kids, and the kids have got to learn how to be around the pup. It's about supervision, you know, it's supervision, but you can't do that. You can't do that all the time. It's just not possible because you need to, you know, make a phone call or make the dinner or you know, have a life, you know, on your phone, you know. So I would say put in separation in place, safe spaces for both the kids and the dog so that they're separated. So baby gates in place, something like that, a pen for the puppy. I would be, if it's a young toddler, it would be full adult active supervision at all times. So, and that doesn't mean just being in the same room. Yeah. That means actively supervising. So, you know, being down on the floor between the dog and the puppy, between the child and the puppy. So there's an adult to kind of manage things, especially if it's a toddler or a kind of sitting up baby. Developmentally, they're
grabby.
At the grabby stage, and especially if you've got, you know, a Labradoodle or a Cockapoo or one of, you know, a dog with a fluffy coat, that's just asking to be grabbed. And, you know, you want to be avoiding the possibility that child is inadvertently going to hurt the puppy. So full act, and you've got a puppy that's probably quite nippy and bitey and mouthy, which is, well, it's not fine for an adult, but we can deal with it, but a child can't. So, full adult supervision, active supervision. If you can't supervise, you separate. Now that doesn't mean you need to exclude. It can just be a baby gate, so you can have one. There can still be visual contact, and supervision. And as the child grows, teaching the child how to interact with the dog. That, you know, the dog's in their crate, they don't get touched. If the dog's on their bed, they don't get touched. How to appropriately pet a dog.
Yeah.
You know, so one of the things, even with a very, very young child, what you can do is, you know, you don't want to leave them free rein to pat that dog because you're going to get that grabbiness. So you can kind of place your hand over their little hand and kind of grasp, you know, clasp their fingers, and, you know, you're in charge, but they're touching the dog. So I think it's teaching the child from the get-go how to be around dogs and what's respectful and what's appropriate.
Yeah.
And when the dog had enough, but that involves the adults understanding that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a big gap, I think, in a lot of dog owners.
I would agree.
Knowledge.
Yeah.
I think you only need to go into Google and Google dogs and babies, dogs and kids, and look at the videos that come up. So I shared one on my page a couple of weeks ago, I think, of a little girl, wee toddler, bouncing on the back of a big kind of pitty type mix. Dog's super tolerant, but not loving it. But all the comments, I mean, hundreds of comments under the original video of how cute, what a good big brother, you know. And if you know what you're looking for, you're watching that video going, oh my God, that's scary.
And it's just the dog. So some of them, their tolerance will never run out. Yeah. They will just go, that's, and again, I'm not loving it, but I can put up with it.
Yeah. But tolerance is, we tolerate things we'd rather not.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's not fair on the dog, because at some stage that dog has a bad day, is sore, is feeling rubbish. It might decide it's had enough. And even if it doesn't, it's not really any life for the dog. But the but the parents, I think, some parents, it's not done out of, nobody deliberately puts their child in harm's way to get a cute video. Well, you would hope, you know, they just don't see it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They do,
you don't know what you don't know, so you can't teach your children how to listen to what the dog's telling you if you don't understand what the dog's telling you. So that's a big part of the work that somebody like me would do with a family, would be talking to them about all these little, everybody understands a growl or a snap, but people don't know about shake-offs, about lip licks, about yawning, about head turns, you know.
So it's all the stuff that happens before the really shouty stuff from the dog.
So especially with bites to children, you get, it came out of the blue, there was no warning. But actually, I would say the vast majority of the time there's been warning, but nobody's heard it because they don't know.
I remember years ago listening to Ian Dunbar, who was one of the first people that I learned from, and he used to do a podcast. I don't know if he still does, but he used to do these kind of like silly wee sketches and stuff like this. And he was talking about, he played the role of, he played two roles, and it was supposed to be a Rottweiler being interviewed by a reporter, and the Rottweiler had bitten somebody, had bitten his owner. And so he said, Benji, I heard that you had an incident during the week. Yeah, about my owner. So what happened? I've told him 100 times. Don't touch me like that. I really don't like it. But he kept getting in my face. And then when I tried to move away, he dragged me back in and touched me again. And then when I started growling at him, he shouted again at me. And that's me growling, saying to him, I don't want you to do that. He says, and that get ignored, or I get shouted at for doing this. And eventually I'd had enough. So I just jumped up and bit him. So I told him several hundred times, please stop doing that. And if we reframe it like that, how many times would we put up with somebody doing something that we didn't like, and having to say to them repeatedly, stop doing that? You'll reach the end of your tether at some point. Yeah,
exactly. And it's, so it's just, I think with a family with children that are bringing a puppy in, I think it's really, really important. And if people, I think I've had one client in the time that I've been doing this that has been in that position and has contacted me before the puppy arrived to say, we want you to come and do a session with the kids about dogs. before this dog arrives, which was fantastic parenting. It was really refreshing to see. But it was talking to both the adults and the kids about, you know, all these small signals, because you say, you know, that they're there. But if you don't speak the language, you can't understand.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just pause for a second and we'll come back after the message.
I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for listening. If you like this information, there's plenty more to come, so please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it on. We're also on YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. Search Glasgow Dog Trainer and Behaviour Consultant, and there's a ton of free content on there for you to consume. If you love it, please let somebody else know. Thanks again for supporting us.
Okay, welcome back. And if you've just jumped into this, we're with Aileen, who's a Family Paws trainer, and Family Paws is an organisation which educates trainers to help new families, either with a new puppy, families with a puppy, or existing families with a new baby, existing families with a dog with a new baby. Okay, all right. So what can new parents do to prepare their dog for the baby arriving?
Okay, so the first thing is start as soon as you know you're pregnant. Start thinking about this.
That's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, that's because if you are trying to change, depends what your issues are, but if you're changing behaviour, it's not going to happen overnight. In most cases, it takes a bit of time. And starting in advance, what it means is you can start to build in these changes gently and slowly, so that by the time the baby arrives, this is normal. One of the only things that's changing is a new baby, which is big enough in itself, you know, but the other stuff is all normal. So start immediately. And what I would say is think about what might change for your dog and how your dog might react to that. So you need to understand your dog and know your dog. So, you know, is your dog, does he live his life by the clock? Is he a dog that will come and bark in your face at 5 o'clock? You know, it's dinner time. Because if he is, that's something you want to start to try and build in a bit of flex in that schedule, because that's.
So how would we do that? Maybe 10 minutes before 5 and 10 minutes after type thing?
Yeah, so I would just start varying dinner time just by 5 minutes or so around, you know, the time that they would normally get their dinner, just to begin to build in, so that they're not expecting that dinner, you know, 5 o'clock on the dot. It's in the window of 5 o'clock. So it might be 5:15, it might be 5:15. The dog's not going to have a meltdown if it's, you know. So just making changes. The key to most of these things is making the changes in small increments.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they don't notice the changes.
Sure.
So yeah, are they a clock watcher? Are they kind of quite flexible? The exercise, how will that change? Chances are their exercise is going to go down.
Sure.
Possibly, depending on the time of year you have your baby. Maybe if your baby in the summer, you're out walking with the pram all the time. But so, for example, my dog that I had when I had my first daughter, I had an office job then, and I used to come in, you know, at kind of 6 o'clock, 6:30, and take the dog out to kind of decompress from the day. And he would be walked kind of by the river, up in the fields, through the woods, off lead most of the time. Now, after my daughter was born, there was, well, certainly initially, it was on. Yeah, that just stopped. You know, the walks were shorter because I didn't have, you know, an hour and a half to go for a walk. I was pushing a pram, so it wasn't up through the woods and the fields. It was around the streets on lead. So that all changed pretty much overnight for him, because I didn't know then all the stuff I know now. So start to maybe decrease the exercise a little bit, and you don't need to start that so far in advance, but certainly in the kind of weeks running up to, you know, the birth of your baby, start to decrease that exercise a little bit. Maybe mix up, you know, some on lead, some off lead. Just begin to introduce the changes. It might be that the person that walks the dog is going to change.
Sure.
Maybe instead, if it's always been one, you know, partner, that maybe that's not going to work and it's going to be the other. So getting the dog used to changes like that. A big one is where the dog sleeps.
Okay.
A lot of the time the dog's maybe up in the bedroom or on the bed, which is totally fine if it's just adults in the room. But add in a sleep, you know, a newborn, an infant who's maybe in a crib beside your bed or co-sleeping, and that's not safe.
Yeah.
You know, that's just, if you're sleeping, you can't supervise. Yeah. So,
and even if it's the coolest dog in the world, the dog can roll over, scratch the wee one, roll over on top, and you'll get crushing injuries. And this isn't to alarm anybody that's listening to this, but just to prepare yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Sometimes you do feel a bit of a prophet of doom doing this and telling people everything they can't do, but it's not. It's just to say you've got to think about this stuff.
Sure.
Well, if your dog has been used to sleeping on your bed for 2, 3, 4 years, and all of a sudden you expect them to sleep downstairs, in the lounge with the door shut, when you've got a new baby, you get little enough sleep a lot of the time. Certainly at the beginning. You do not want a dog whining, barking, scratching at the door. So it's things like, where's he going to sleep? Do I have to start changing that now? And then you can do that gradually, on a bed, on the floor, moving the bed out to the hallway, down to that,
And with all of these questions, I always, and it's just changing people's perception of this. Anything that we're expecting of the dog, if we look at it from, so likes of that, if we go from the dog sleeping, even if the dog sleeps in your bedroom, so Logan sleeps in the bedroom with me, but I know he's up in the bed just now, but he doesn't get up in the bed during the night with me, but he'll sleep in his bed. Now, if he sleeps in his bed on the floor in my bedroom for years, and then I put him in another room, what I would say to somebody is, could you cope with that? Could you cope with just, this is, I mean, although I travel a lot, I still really like my bed. I like my own bed in my own house, and then somebody comes in one day and just decides that I've got to sleep in the living room. Yeah. And I'm like, but what happened to my bedroom and all that nice, So, and when we think about it like that, you're like, well, could we deal with it? And if the answer is no, then I think generally it's not fair to ask that of our dogs without some help.
Yeah, and and the other thing is, it's not just that one change.
Yeah.
It's, if you haven't thought about any of this stuff, it's the exercise, it's where you sleep, it's when you get your dinner, it's who interacts with you, it's the amount, everything. So it's just like a bomb's going off in the dog's life, and then we wonder why they can't cope.
Yeah, because we had a Bordeaux dog to Bordeaux, and when I think of the insanity that when we got him, my daughter was 15 months old, and we were pregnant with my son, and we bought a puppy, a Mastiff puppy at that. Mental. And what he did going through that was, he was then like, if you left a wet nappy on the floor, that's just a big toy. And then he goes and pulled it apart, and now you've got, as well as having to look at after 2 kids that are 2 or younger, and the dog, you've now got to clean all that up, and then manage the dog when you're trying to clean that up and make sure the baby's safe and so on.
I think the key is thinking about what might change and thinking about how can we make these changes
easier,
gently and gradually, and get them out the way before the baby comes, so that this is normal, habitual. The dog sleeps downstairs. He's used to that. He's settled. There's not a problem. The dog maybe might have been previously in the back seat in the car. That's not appropriate. So if you need to train your dog to get used to being behind a dog guard or in a crate in the boot, you need to start now. Don't start when you're bringing their baby home from hospital and expect your dog just to be cool with it, because
and the thing is, it shouldn't be a surprise that our baby's arriving.
You generally get a bit of notice.
Right. So even if and without being, and we're not Victorian, so we'll talk, but even if a woman's cycle is not massively regular, you're still getting 6 months notice, aren't you?
Yeah.
So you get at least 6 months notice. Oh yeah, I'm pregnant. That's that. So it's in 6 months' time. Depending on the woman's own biology and stuff like that. So we've got at least 6 months to prepare for this.
Yeah, and it's thinking about it in advance and making those changes gradually, but also, and that's for just your bog standard dog with no issues but especially if you've got a dog who's a bit wary about new things or changes, struggles to adapt to them. So like my dog, like Charlie, he would, if a pram suddenly appeared in the hallway, that would spook him. He wouldn't be very comfortable about walking by that. So you want to get all these, it's understanding your dog and knowing what might be a problem for them. Is it sounds? Can I start playing the sound of a baby crying in advance and pair that with some really good stuff, so that it's not exactly the same as the real thing, but it's like, it's an approximation. do that now. So if I know my dog's noise sensitive, start doing that. If I know my dog's a bit wary of new things, start to bring in the pram and the baby chair bouncer thing in advance when there's no baby in it, and he can get used to it in his own time, and he can explore it and investigate it safely.
Yeah.
And, you know, then he's used to it by the time there happens to be a baby in it. It's one less thing for him to deal with.
I think
so
as well,
who your dog is as well.
Yeah. One of the things I used to say as well is if you get lots of the baby dolls that we see are really realistic now, you know, and you get ones that are a crying baby and stuff. So you wrap that baby doll in a blanket, and then you act as if you're hushing and swaddling the baby and with the dog round you, and do some training that way. And you can do that well in advance, you know.
Yeah.
All of the, from a dog's position, all this weird stuff that we start doing, we can start saying, getting the dog used to it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And train the dog what we want them to do.
Yeah. So it just means if you get all that out of the way in advance, it's just less for the dog to deal with at the time, and that makes the likelihood, it makes it more likely that they're going to cope better. It's not a guarantee, because sometimes, you know, there's been no warning and you come in and the dog's just freaked by the baby or super interested in the baby, but at least all the practical things are out the way. Yeah. You've at least got them used to things like, you know, the pram, the chair, the sound of the baby crying, you know, baby gates, you know, just put them up in advance so that it's nothing new.
Yeah, just there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not rocket science. It just needs a bit of thought.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Thanks for that. That's really, really good. Okay. How do we, so we'll kind of finish on something which is kind of, we've talked a lot about the problems and being that you're now the prophet of doom and all the rest of it. All right. So how do we carve out some time for our dogs? So I've got some thoughts on that as well. And then how do we do some other enrichment? So if you're listening to this and you've not heard that term before, enrichment is, enrichment for a human would be reading a book, watching something on Netflix, doing a hobby. So it's something which is active and engaging your mind and your body, one or the other. Playing chess, you know, board games, even computer games is enriching for us. So it adds value, hopefully, to our lives. So what ways can we carve out time for our dogs and add some more enrichment into them, given that we're taking that time away from them?
Yeah, so I think easy ways to add enrichment are how we feed our dog. It's the kind of most obvious one. So feeding them in ways that are going to be more interesting and fun for them. And also you get a kind of, it's win-win, because they also, a lot of them use up mental energy. So if they're not getting as much physical exercise, at least they're getting that mental stimulation, which is, you know, can kind of replace some of that physical exercise, and it keeps the dog occupied for longer. So you get a bit more time. So things like feeding out of Kongs, feeding out of puzzle feeders. If you've got a garden, just scatter feeding in the garden if you can. Just take especially if you feed your dog something like kibble, take their kibble and just scatter it all over the grass and let them go and scent it for it and find it. And chews, bones, anything that involves licking, chewing, scenting, searching. They're all things that the dogs, it's natural behaviour for the dog. So you're giving them an outlet for all this natural behaviour, and it's mental stimulation. So it's going to be mentally tiring and enriching for them.
Lots of those are low arousal exercises as well. So it's not throwing a ball up and down your garden and the dog now comes in wired to the moon. Yeah. So exactly. Thoughtful stuff. And if you've seen some stuff on, a lot of the time, when we're looking at enrichment, lots of people will suggest things like, so you have toilet roll tubes and put some food in them and fold them up and stick them in a cereal box. Now, they're fine if you've got time to then clean up the carnage that ensues.
When you get a baby.
So there's pieces of cardboard and newspaper all over your living room, and you're like, that's just something else for me to do. Yeah. So the enriching toys are like Kong. The Kong company makes some really cool ones. Yeah. Puzzle Nina Ottosson as well. So I'll try and put some of these in the description, the links for these. So it's having, again, that forethought of, can I do this in a way that's not creating more work for myself?
Yeah. So I mean, things like, you know, Kongs, have 6. I'm not, get somebody, if it's people come round when you've got a baby and they always ask, "Okay, what can I do to help?" Go and stuff my Kongs for me
Yeah.
and put them in the freezer. And then you've got them to hand if you can't get out for a walk and it's all going wrong that day. You've got something to hand, have some enrichment toys. But as you say, it doesn't need to be anything fancy. It can just be literally scattering the food on the floor or in the back garden. I think as well, if the baby is sleeping or you've got a bit of downtime, just giving the dog some loving and petting and
cuddles.
Just, that tactile stuff, because that's probably what they're missing out on a bit.
So you see this as well. You get a lot of, couples or families this will make you laugh, but you get lots of, because women tend to be more mature than guys anyway, for a broad variety of reasons, okay? But that's something that I heard when I was a young dad, and I would listen to some of my pals, and it was like I don't get any time with the missus anymore, so they're missing that kind of, not just the loving, but actually just that attention, and again, that's what's happening to your dog as well.
So it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just think about, how can I feed them in ways that are going to interest them? How can I, and when you do take them out on a walk, it's not, so I always say, one thing I do say to mums is, I think if you possibly can, leave the baby at home if you can, and take the dog for a walk yourself, because it's so good. It allows you to
not leaving the baby alone.
Well, not alone, with their dad or their gran or somebody, not alone.
Yourself, there's a remote control.
It's good for the mum's mental health, getting out there, just getting outside, because there's days where you're, ready for, killing somebody. Getting out, and it keeps that connection with your dog. It keeps that bond going. You don't need to go far. It doesn't need to be a 10-mile hike, just a bit of sniffy walk, just giving them a bit of time, one-to-one time.
I was just thinking there, when you're talking about when somebody comes in and they say, "What can you do?" and you say, "You could stuff the Kongs for me." Everybody buys you a gift when you've got everybody buys a gift for the baby, so you can. But again, I know this from experience, because lots of young couples they haven't been working for 20 years and have got some capital behind them and all that kind of stuff, so they're just. And then there's the big financial outlay of the new baby. So you get your pram, your car seat, which cost hundreds of pounds. Yeah. Ridiculous. So you can then say to somebody, "Could you buy me a puzzle feeder for the dog?" Now, your family might turn around and say, "Well, that's crazy, but it's going to help, because I need those for my dog. That's going to make my life easier, and I haven't got the money to spend on it."
Yeah.
Or you ask for Amazon vouchers. Amazon's got everything, and without getting, not that we want to be giving Jeff Bezos any more money than he already got, but we can ask for vouchers for Tesco, or for a shopping centre that has got a Pets at Home or something like that. So you can then go, "I'm going to go and use these to buy that," and you're not having that outlay for, because dog toys they're not the cheapest,
Yeah, no, and even like things like good chews, like Yak Snacks, or if you buy something good, long lasting quality the dog likes, they're not cheap, but these things, if you've got some of those to hand, it just makes life a bit easier, because the dogs get something to do, as opposed to just leaving them hanging, and then they're going to find their own entertainment, and that might not be what you want, so.
Wonderful, that's great. So lots of really cool information in there. So where can people find a Family Paws trainer? So where would they, if somebody's listening, where would they go to?
So Family Paws website is familypaws.com. Okay. And there's a search facility on that to find a Family Paws trainer in your country or local area. So all the Family Paws trainers are listed on that website. So if you go there, you'll get more information about Family Paws. They also have some good resources that you can download, and handouts and information for new and expectant parents, if you just want to get a bit more information. And as I say, there's a directory of all the registered licensed trainers.
Perfect, wonderful, great. Thanks very much for your time. It's been really, really nice and really valuable, and a lot of stuff that I hadn't thought about before as well. So, yeah. So thanks for your time this afternoon.
Cool. You're welcome.
With her family and her terrier cross, Charlie.